Hello and welcome to Mountain Patriot Homestead. Today, fall is in the air, and what better way to celebrate it than to use some of our fall harvest and one of the recipes out of my little red recipe box. Let's get started. Today's recipe that I'm making is one that I remember as a little girl going to visit my great Aunt Hattie, who lived in Greene County, Tennessee. She was born in 1904, and depending on who you talk to, some say she was born in Yancey County, some say she was born in Madison County, but those two are so close together you can throw a rock and hit the other side, so they both could be right. Who knows? It might have been she was born on the county line. But regardless, my sweet great Aunt Hattie, we loved going to see her whenever I was little because she lived up in the mountains of Tennessee, and we would drive over. And one of my last memories that I remember of my Aunt Hattie, not because she passed, but because we moved, was she had a big apple tree out back, and during that visit, she told us, "Sweeties, if you'll go out there and pick Aunt Hattie some apples, I'll make us some dessert." And so being kids, you know, we were all into that, so we ran out there and we picked up far more apples than Aunt Hattie needed to make this dessert. But then I got to stand in the chair beside my Aunt Hattie and watch her make this. And so it's a great honor today to make something that my great aunt made for me when I was a little girl, and just kind of dedicate to her memory. I love you, Aunt Hattie. And this recipe is really, if you research apple dumplings on the internet, what you come up with is a bunch of recipes, mostly of apples that are wrapped in a pastry and baked, and that's called apple dumpling. Well, that's not the apple dumplings that I remember. Aunt Hattie's apple dumplings was cooked on the stovetop, and as I'll be showing you here in just a few minutes and I get these apples done, the apples were cooked, and then in the juices you added dough, bits of dough, much like you're fixing chicken and dumplings. Now, the only difference in my chicken and dumplings and these apple dumplings is when I make my dumplings for chicken and dumplings, I roll them out and put it in there. Put the dough in the pot in slices. Well, this you dump it in. I say dump it in. You put it in by spoonfuls, and that makes the dumplings in with the apples. And so it makes this wonderful, wonderful dessert. Now, these apples are so huge. Last year, the apple harvest here, the trees were so loaded that the limbs were just almost on the ground because there were so many apples. Well, this year it was about that way, but it wasn't because there were so many. There were actually fewer apples, but these apples are just massive. My husband described them as, you know, grapefruits pretending to be apples. But, I mean, that's a big apple. And as a matter of fact, let's see. That apple is a little over a half pound by itself. So that is a massive apple. And I am just taking these. I need 4 cups, which I'm just kind of eyeballing. So, I mean, this kind of thing, this is not an exact science here. So it's not like some recipes. This one's pretty forgiving, but I need 4 cups of apples, and I'm just kind of placing them. You can't see, but I've got a pot here that's got 4 cups of water in it. If I need to add more water here in a little bit, I will, but it's got 4 cups of water in it. And if you're afraid your apples are going to turn on you, you know, turn a little brown on you, and you don't want that, you can put a little bit of lemon juice, but these are going to be cooked anyway, so you ain't going to tell if it turns a little bit before you get them all in there. I mean, it really don't take that long. It wouldn't be taking me that long if I wasn't talking, but you get these little spots out of there. I know some people are particular about little spots. And you see me saving this back here. Got a little fruit fly in the house. You see me saving these back here in this. Can't talk today, but you see me putting these peelings and cores in this bowl. It's because I'm not going to throw them out. I actually use my peelings and things to make apple cider vinegar. I make my own apple cider vinegar because, you know, why not? You've got the stuff to make it with, and it's good for you, and you ain't wasting nothing. So I'll use that, and I'll make me up a batch of apple cider vinegar. I've already got some from last year's apples, but now I'll have some from this year's apples. But this is all I'm going to do. I'm going to keep peeling these and chopping them up. I've got about 5 of these very large apples here that may end up being more than 4 cups, but you know what, that's okay. But the recipe calls for 4 cups of apples, chopped up, peeled and chopped up, and 4 cups of water, and then we'll add the rest of the ingredients, okay? So I'm not going to make you sit here and watch all this, but y'all come back here in just a few minutes and we'll go on with the rest of it. So I've got my apples cut up and in the pot with 4 cups of water. To that, I am going to add 3/4 cups of just granulated sugar, white sugar, and 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Use light brown, dark brown, whichever kind. Just make sure that you pack it, and that is 1/4 cup of that brown sugar. It just goes right in there. And I'll be adding 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and 2 or 3 pinches of salt, just whichever suits you. And that goes in there. And then the last thing is just going to be a tablespoon of butter. But let me get this stirred up in here first before I just toss that butter in there. And this is all going to cook on the stove for, once it comes to a boil, you're going to cook it for about 5 minutes. Just let them apples start getting soft. And while it's doing that, we'll start making up the actual dumpling dough. So let's get this on the stove. We've started in this mixing bowl with 1 3/4 cups of just all-purpose flour, and to that we're going to add 1 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder and just another 2 or 3 pinches of salt. That's just going to go right in there. We've also got 1/4 cup of granulated sugar and 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. Just going to add that right in there, and that's all for our dry ingredients. Just mix those together. Get those in there good. And our last 2 ingredients are our wet ingredients. This is a very simple recipe. It doesn't take a lot of time. Probably the longest it takes you is with the peeling the apples, and you know, if you had an apple peeler, I don't guess it would take you that long, but it's not, when you're only doing a few apples, it's not bad doing it by hand. So I am going to add 1 2/3 cup of milk, and if you're wondering what kind of milk this is just whole milk. Again, it's what I got, it's what I'm using. If you've got some other kind of milk, you can use that, I reckon, but I'm just using plain old cow's milk. And I have 3 tablespoons of oil, and this is just vegetable oil. If you have some substitute you'd rather use, if you want to use melted butter, that would work fine too. But just 3 tablespoons of that. I'm going to stir that up good. I wish that when I made these videos that these recipes would turn out perfect every time, but they don't. And just like I've said in previous videos, when y'all are here, it's like I've got friends in the kitchen, and you know, I don't cook perfect. I just don't. I wish I did. I wish I was, you know, as great as a lot of these other folks, but I'm just not. And so my flour, my dough was just a little more thin than I would have liked it. So what I did is I come back and I've added about another half a cup of flour in here, and that stiffened up my dough a little bit, because a while ago it was more of a cake batter than it was a dumpling batter. Now, if I was making chicken and dumplings, this would still be too thin, but for what we're doing here today, this is exactly what I want. As you can see, it does come off in blobs and not just running off like it was a while ago. So that is how I want it. Like I said, I had to come back and add about another half a cup to the 4 cups I already had in there. I want you to start out with 4 cups just to see if that's enough, because I'm telling you, sometimes 4 cups is plenty, but I don't know if it's the weather, the flour, or the way I'm holding my mouth, but sometimes it works and sometimes it don't. I've got the timer going right now on the apples. I wanted them to boil for about 5 minutes just to start getting soft, and I'll go check them here in a minute to see how they're doing. So 5 minutes are up, and here are how the apples are looking. They have softened up nicely, but they're not falling apart. I don't want them falling apart, but these are looking beautiful. So it is now time to add the dumpling batter to it. Just gonna pull my bowl right up here to try to minimize the mess I make, and I'm just gonna start dropping it by spoonfuls into this batter, into the apples, not into the batter into the apples. There we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a lid on this without stirring it, and I'm going to turn the heat down, and I'm going to let it simmer until those dumplings get done. So turning the heat down now, I am putting the lid on it, and we're just going to let it alone for just a little bit, and then we'll come back and check on it. All right? And there it is. Those dumplings are ready, and I'm just going to come in here. And I like nutmeg. I don't know about y'all, but I'm just going to sprinkle a little nutmeg on top of mine. Now, Aunt Hattie didn't do this, or I didn't remember doing this. So I'm going to spoon some of this out into a bowl, and we're going to give it a taste. Here we go. Just getting down in there, because I want one of them dumplings. Whee! Them beautiful baked apples. They ain't baked apples. Them's cooked apples, but look at that, ain't that good? Look at that. I'm gonna let this cool off for a minute, because I don't know if you can see all that steam coming off of there, but my fingers can feel that steam coming off that pot. So I'm gonna let this cool off a little bit before I taste it. But stand by, we are gonna taste this. Alright, I have got my bowl here with my Appalachian apple dumplings. And you see the inside of that dumpling there? It is totally cooked. But it's not like eating a cobbler, where if you put it in the oven and bake it, it's got that nice golden crust on top of it. If the color of it turns you off a little bit, smack some ice cream down on top of it or whatever, because I know some people are just real caught up on how things, if they're the right color or the right texture. Now, texture's hard to get around, but color, like I said, throw some you can throw you some whipped cream on top. You can throw you some ice cream on top. That is still cooking there. So got me a little bit of apple, a little bit of dumpling. Try not to burn my tongue off. The flavors are definitely all there. Love you, Aunt Hattie. Do certain foods like transport you back to your childhood? Yeah, this does. Good stuff. Love you, Aunt Hattie. Love y'all. And I hope you give this Appalachian apple dumpling recipe a try. And y'all come back again real soon. We'll talk to y'all later. Mountain Patriot Homestead, signing out.